When a journalist tries to corner J.D. Vance, the unexpected happens. When a journalist attempts to corner J.D. Vance on live TV with provocative questions about his past, he thinks he's in control. But then, in a twist no one saw coming, the entire dynamic flips. Before we dive in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Now picture this. Studio lights blaze on one of America's most watched talk shows. The atmosphere crackles with anticipation as J.D. Vance, the newly inaugurated Vice President, steps onto the set, fresh from taking his oath of office. He carries himself with quiet confidence, the demeanor of a man with nothing to hide and everything to prove. But Marcus Bennett, the show's host, has other plans. Known for his sharp tongue and liberal leanings, Bennett has spent weeks preparing for this moment. While his producer promised a respectful discussion about the new administration, the glint in Bennett's eye reveals a different agenda. As Vance takes his seat, the usual pre-interview pleasantries feel rushed and mechanical. Bennett's smile never quite reaches his eyes, and the production team seems unusually tense. Drawing on his Marine Corps training, Vance senses an ambush. Every instinct tells him Bennett's questions are loaded with hidden traps. The first one comes wrapped in a smile. But Vance notices Bennett's white-knuckle grip on his interview cards. "Mr. Vice President," Bennett begins, his voice oozing artificial sweetness. "Let's talk about your remarkable journey, from Trump critic to his second-in-command." Vance offers a measured smile, his eyes reflecting the wisdom of hard-fought life lessons. "You know, Marcus, that's actually the perfect place to start," he says, "because it speaks to something bigger than politics. It speaks to the American capacity for growth and understanding." The audience leans in, surprised by Vance's lack of defensiveness. Bennett shifts in his chair. His carefully rehearsed follow-up suddenly loses its edge. "Growth and understanding?" Bennett scoffs. "Is that what we're calling it now? Some might argue it's just political convenience." Vance's tone remains steady. "You see, Marcus, in America we cherish the tradition of changing our minds when presented with new information. Years ago I criticized the president because I saw things through a narrow lens. But then I witnessed something remarkable. I saw his policies making a real difference for the forgotten Americans I wrote about in my book." For a moment, Bennett's expression tightens. Vance continues, his gaze direct but unchallenging. "Let me ask you something, Marcus. Have you ever changed your mind about something important? Ever looked at the evidence and realized your first judgment might have been wrong?" A pause lingers a fraction too long. "We're here to talk about your changes, Mr. Vice President, not mine," Bennett snaps, shuffling his cards, eager to move on. "Speaking of changes," Bennett continues, "let's discuss your recent speech at the National Prayer Breakfast. You spoke about divine guidance in government decisions. Don't you think that's a dangerous mix of church and state?" The audience tenses. Bennett has just stepped onto sacred ground, but the spark in Vance's eyes reveals he's been waiting for this challenge. "Divine guidance?" Vance leans forward, his voice steady. "What I actually said was that our founding fathers understood the importance of moral guidance in leadership. They weren't afraid of faith, they were afraid of tyranny." A ripple of "amen" echoes from the crowd. Bennett's jaw clenches. "But surely in our modern, diverse society," he begins, only to be gently cut off as Vance raises a hand. "Let me finish this thought, because it's important," Vance says, his tone respectful yet firm. "When I took my oath of office, I placed my hand on the Bible, the same way leaders have done throughout our nation's history. Not because we're establishing a state religion, but because we recognize that our rights come from God, not merely from government." Bennett glances at his producer, who watches intently from the sidelines. Then Vance adds, his voice carrying a note of personal reflection, "You know what's interesting, Marcus? When I was a Marine, nobody questioned our chaplain's presence. Nobody complained when we prayed before missions, because in those moments of truth, even the skeptics understood there was something deeper than politics." Bennett flushes. "Let's move on. To your relationship with President Trump," Bennett presses. "You recently called him God's instrument for America's renewal. Don't you think that's a bit extreme?" Vance doesn't flinch. "What I think is extreme, Marcus, is how some in the media seem more concerned with a leader who prays than with policies that hurt American families." The studio falls into an unusual quiet. Even Bennett's trademark rapid-fire interruptions are momentarily subdued, but the host isn't ready to surrender. You've written about your humble beginnings, yet now you're sitting in the halls of power. Some might say you've forgotten where you came from. Vance remains unfazed. That's interesting, Marcus, because where I come from, we judge people by their character, not by how well they fit into Washington's expectations. Bennett scoffs. Is that what you call this complete reversal on Trump? You once wrote quite passionately against him. Vance nods. Yes, I did. And you know what takes more character? Admitting when you're wrong, standing up for what you believe in, even when people like you twist it into something else. Murmurs of agreement ripple through the audience. Bennett tugs at his collar. Mr. Vice President, you built your reputation as a voice for working-class Americans, yet here you are in an expensive suit defending a billionaire. Don't you see the irony? Vance's expression remains unchanged, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. You know what I see, Marcus? I see someone who thinks an expensive suit changes a man's values. Let me tell you something. These values, the ones I learned from my grandmother in Middletown, Ohio, they don't change with your zip code or your job title. Bennett narrows his eyes. So you're saying your transformation has nothing to do with political ambition? That we should ignore your past criticisms? He pauses, then adds mockingly, that we should just accept you're now Trump's puppet? The word lands like a thrown gauntlet. Vance's response is swift and precise. You know, Marcus, that word, puppet, says more about you than it does about me. He leans forward slightly. In your world, strong loyalty is something to mock. But let me tell you what I learned as a Marine. In combat, you judge a person by their actions, not by what the media says about them. I've seen President Trump's character firsthand, not the caricature you and your colleagues have created. The audience erupts into applause. Bennett tries to regain control, but it's too late. His carefully orchestrated ambush has backfired spectacularly. As Vance rises, he turns to the camera, his expression resolute. They thought they could shame me for my faith. They thought they could mock my support for President Trump. But here's what they don't understand. These aren't just political positions. These are the principles that build America. The audience leaps to their feet in a thunderous ovation. And just like that, the interview that was meant to humiliate J.D. Vance becomes the moment that defines him. If you believe in standing firm in your values, don't forget to like and subscribe. And remember, faith, family, and freedom aren't just words. They're the foundation of everything we hold dear. God bless you, and God bless America.